So in the last video, I stepped through the implementation of my Z Shell copilot. We looked at how the code was actually organized to ask a question and get back a suggested command. Now in this video, there's one aspect I didn't cover, and that was using a subshell so that the request happens in the background. And then once the response comes back, that's brought back to the foreground process and then showed in terms of the prompt with a suggested command for the user. So first up, I want to just take a look at an overview of the architecture of this, and then I'll even dive into the code a little bit and point out some key aspects. Okay, so architecturally, we have the prompt itself that we can see visually. And then we also have behind the scenes the main shell process. That's where our widget will run when we hit Control B. So when we hit Control B, we start up our widget. And then one of the things it does almost right away, it starts up a subshell. And it is this subshell that then actually reaches out to OpenAI. Once that gets a response back, it then takes that response, formats it, and sticks it inside of a series of files, just a temporary storage location. So we get the response from OpenAI as well as a status indicator. And then the subshell signals the parent shell. And it does that via that sig user1 signal. And it tells the parent shell, okay, I've got the response for you. And so then the parent shell actually goes out and reads the response, and it then uses that response to update the prompt to show us the command that was generated. All right, so stepping through the code, we have the widget. That's the primary anchor point, and that runs in the main shell. And then just before that widget is defined, I have some variables that are captured. These keep track of temporary files for the response, because we have to use files to transfer the response back to the main shell, and also capture the main shell's process ID. We'll need that in a moment to signal to the main shell that the subshell is complete. All right, so the main shell starts up. It sets the post display to asking OpenAI. And then that's about all it does, because almost immediately it has this code block here with the curly braces. It ends down below here. So this block of code here defines what the subshell is going to do. And right after that block of code, I have an ampersand and then a pipe, which means that this block of code will be run in a background job, and that job will be immediately disowned. So you won't, for example, see it in the table of jobs. Of course, that's not that important. At the end of the day, we just need to know that this code runs in the background in a subshell. And so if you look through this, we have building up our request and getting back a response. We then parse the exit code. And when we do that, we actually write out to those temporary files. We have two files, one for the post display and one for the buffer. So basically the status code and then the suggested command, those go into two separate files. And then the very last thing here, we send a signal to the main shell just before the subshell exits. We use sig user1. And so then the main shell can trap that signal, and it can react to that by updating the prompt. And if you scroll down here, that's exactly what's going on down below. So I've defined a trap right here on sig user1. Call this on OpenAI done, which just basically calls into yet another widget, which is defined down below here. And in this case, I'm reading the contents of the two temporary files. And then we use that to update the prompt with whatever suggested command was generated. Now, you could get rid of using a subshell. The only problem would be when you try to append the word asking and show that down below the prompt, it's not going to show up because you're going to block the prompt from refreshing until you actually get back a response, until your widget runs to completion.